Hello, welcome to the self learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 6, Thomas Hobbes, and we start with topic civil law and natural law. After the constitution of civil society, natural law is for all practical purposes replaced by civil law, which is the criteria of the sovereign. For Hobbes, the conflict between common law and the statute law and the constitutional crisis arising out of it was the real problem to tackle, and he was confident that this could be solved only by making the will of the sovereign supreme and the ultimate point of reference in all legal and political matters. To him, it is reason, not will, that makes law obligatory. In civil society, natural law does not disappear, it is assimilated to civil law. The law of nature and the civil law contain each other and are of equal extent. The law of nature, therefore, is a part of civil law in all commonwealths of the world. Reciprocally, also, the civil law is a part of the dictates of nature. For justice, that is to say, performance of covenant and giving to every man his own, is a dictate of law of nature. Civil and natural law are not different kinds, but different parts of law, whereof one part being written is called civil, the other unwritten natural. But the right of nature, that is the natural liberty of man, may be the civil law be abrogated and restrained. May the end of making laws is no other but such restraint, without the which there cannot possibly be any peace. And law was brought into the world for nothing else but to limit the natural liberty of particular men, in such manner as they might not hurt but assist one another and join together against a common enemy. This passage has been interpreted differently according to the degree of importance given to natural law in Hobbes' system. According to Plasmans, when Hobbes says that natural law and civil law contain one another, he is not denying that man may have good grounds for believing that civil law is contrary to the law of nature. He is saying that they ought always to do what they promised, which was to accept the sovereign's interpretation of natural law as alone valid. They must never use the law of nature as an excuse for not obeying civil law. According to Warrender, with the advent of sovereign authority and the civil law that it provides, the laws of nature are not superseded, though their manner of operation is altered. They persist in civil society together with civil law itself and play, in Hobbes' theory, a part in determining the patterns of obligation in civil society. no less essential than their functions in the state of nature. Hobbes' argument for the absolute power of sovereign is by no means a plea for adulterated despotism. He consistently maintained that the object of the state was the safety and well being of men, and for this the sovereign was accountable to God. He also maintained that by safety is not meant a bare preservation, but also all other contentment of life, which every man by lawful industry, without danger or hurt to the commonwealth, shall acquire to himself. Admirers of Hobbes have concern in this a distinct element of liberalism, but it would be more appropriate to view it as a policy of enlightened despotism. Now we have come to the conclusion. Two aspects of Hobbes' thought require special attention: his absolutism and his individualism. It is often asserted that the two are logically correlated. It is on the basis of his radical individualism that Hobbes builds his theory of political absolutism. And following this line of thought, it is also claimed that Hobbes' political theory is essentially a theory of liberalism. Hobbes' emphasis on natural right, it is said, distinguishes him from the classical natural law theorist. But here a little caution is necessary. Natural right is the basis of Hobbes' theory, it is not its conclusion. Hobbes starts with natural rights of the individual but severely restricts them to found a viable civil society. He explicitly says the right of nature, that is, the natural liberty of man, may be the civil law be abridged and restrained. Nay, the end of making laws is no other but such restraint, without which there cannot possibly be any peace. And law was brought into the world for nothing else but to limit the natural liberty of particular men, in such manners as they might not hurt but assist one another, and join together against a common enemy. Natural rights lead to war, and natural law brings peace and security. At the end of Leviathan, Hobbes makes an observation which leaves no doubt on this part. For ground the civil right of sovereign and both the duty and liberty of subjects upon the known natural inclinations of mankind, and upon the articles of the law of nature, of which no man that pretends but reason enough to govern his private family ought to be ignorant. Unlike liberal thinkers like John Stuart Mill and Herbert Spencer in the 19th century, and Nozick and Dworkin in 20th century, Hobbes does not espouse individuals' right to limit or resist the authority of the state. According to Dworkin, right-based theorists treat code of conduct as instrumented, perhaps necessary to protect the rights of others, but having no essential value in themselves. The man at their center is the man who benefits from others, compliance, not the man who leads the life of virtue by complying himself. This is the view that Hobbes would most resolutely reject. For Hobbes, a just man has innate disposition to perform just action, and the laws of nature always oblige in foro interno, though not always in foro externo. Right is nothing but the liberty of each man is to use his natural faculties according to right reason. Hobbes' reply to the folly that it is not rational to renege or one's promise is a sufficient refutation of the moralist individualism of Dworkin and Michael. Hobbes' theory of political obligation, despite its strong non-traditional utilitarian bias, has a more solid philosophical and ethical foundation than the so-called right-based morality of modern liberalism. Hobbes' philosophy is an elaborate architectonic system comprising different elements of reality, physical, human, and social, all assimilated into a close-knit uniform pattern by the application of resolutive compositive method of Galileo and the school of Padua, and the geometrical deductive reasoning of Descartes. It is pragmatic of all those atomist theories which conceive society or the state as an artificial creation or aggregation of self subsistent, self enclosed, egoistic individuals who, by mutual agreement or covenant, incorporate themselves into a collective unit or body prolific or their personal benefit. The ontological and moral priority of individual over the state is the basic presupposition of this theory, and it has been a pervasive feature of modern European thought. It stands in sharp contrast to the Aristotelian idea that the state is natural and prior to man. Hobbes' political theory marks the breakdown of traditional institutions and values and denotes the decline of metaphysical wisdom. It hurdles the age of instrumental reason, material pursuits, secular norms, power politics, and utilitarian ethics. Under these conditions, which holds man's ambition and avarice is the supreme power of the sovereign, not the bond of human sympathy and natural harmony. It is a kind of society which has been described by Ferdinand Tönnies as Gesellschaft, as contradictionist from the Gemeinschaft that existed in earlier days. It goes to credit of Hobbes that he caught the spirit of age most clearly and articulated it most brilliantly. But he underestimates the more sublime and noble aspects of human nature. It is true that he has been more sinned against than sinning. But the fact remains that the main emphasis of his thinking was on the darker side of human psychology. He was so much obsessed by his hypothetic deductive method that he took little interest in the actual complex motives that guide men in society. This is the reason why his theory, despite its wide scope and rigorous logic, remains philosophically inadequate and morally uninspiring. Some of his most suggestive and fruitful ideas, like his theory of political obligation and the concept of sovereignty, are more or less independent of his mechanistic philosophy and stand on their own merit. Now, summary of the unit. Hobbes is generally regarded as the father of modern political science. His theories reflect political ideology of the incipient capitalist market society characterized by the doctrine of possessive individualism and the ethic of cutthroat competition and self-aggrandizement. His method was deductive and geometrical rather than empirical and experimental. According to Hobbes, the root cause of conflict in the state of nature are the passions of desire and aversion. Since goods are limited, there is ruthless competition and a struggle for power to retain what is acquired. Conflict is inherent in human nature in blind pursuit of self interest. Another thing that Hobbes points out is that every man has liberty to use his own power as he will for preservation of his own nature and life. This he calls natural right, but at times he equates natural right with power, at times with absence of obligations or with liberty to do that which right reason prescribes. To escape this state of nature and to avoid war, man is endowed with reason and rational self preservation. These are known as laws of nature, which play an important role to transform state of nature into a civil society. In order to escape the state of nature, individuals renounce their natural rights and institute a third person or body of persons conferring all rights on that person or body, authorizing all its action as their own. This common superior or sovereign has to be created through a covenant with the sovereign outside their covenant. Sovereignty is indivisible, inalienable, and perpetual. The sovereign acts according to natural law, but he alone is the interpreter of this law, and his action cannot be challenged. After the constitution of civil society, natural law is assimilated into civil law. Hobbes starts with natural rights of individuals, but restricts them to found a viable civil society. He restricts the natural liberty of man, but does not espouse the individual's right to restrict authority of the state. Here we want to wind up this lecture and we have come to the end of the unit. Thank you so much for your attention.